Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is Rosemary Keane. I'm a communications specialist with the Soybean Innovation Lab. We're just going to have a few more moments here for any other attendees to trickle in, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Once again, my name is Rosemary Keane, and I'm a communications specialist with the Soybean Innovation Lab. And welcome to our webinar this morning, The Economics and Nutrition of Soy in School Lunch, Evidence from the Field. Just to take care of a few housekeeping items before we go ahead and get started. If you're interested in the agenda, it's located in the handouts panel of your GoToWebinar control panel. That should appear on the right side of your screen or anywhere else on your screen if you've shifted it, but it's towards the bottom of that particular panel. Secondly, if you have any questions for our participants, for our panelists, for our presenters during this webinar, please feel free to type them into the questions panel of that control panel. You'll see it on the bottom as well. There's questions and chat. Feel free to use either. And we'll be running some polls and surveys as well. We will address these questions during the Q&A portion of our webinar, and we have members of our team ready to answer those questions and get those organized for us. To go over the agenda for today, once again, I'm giving the introduction. We're going to then head into SIL's investigation of soy into school lunch with Dr. Peter Goldsmith, followed by a presentation by Dr. Juan Andrade, also with SIL, into the role of soy in school lunch, followed by a presentation by SIL's collaborator in the Catholic Relief Service, Mauli Asigbe, about conducting the study, reports from the field. Dr. Goldsmith will then go over the findings, and then we have a panel comprised of several of SIL's partners and collaborators and people from many wonderful organizations looking at the public-private partnerships to scale these findings. After which we will conduct another Q&A, and then we will close the webinar. And once again, if you're interested in this agenda, it's in the handouts section of the control panel. These are just some of the photos that were taken during our study, which Pete will tell you about later and Juan will tell you about later. But as you can see, wonderful stuff, wonderful impact, and really we're very pleased that you're here with us this morning. To give you a sense of who's speaking to you this morning, my name is Rosemary Keane. Again, like I said, here I am on the left. Then you'll be hearing from Dr. Peter Goldsmith, Dr. Juan Andrade, and Mauli Asigbe from the Soybean Innovation Lab and Catholic Relief Services. And now I'd like to give it over to a poll just to get a better understanding of where our attendees are coming from and the kinds of experience that they bring working with school food programs. So you'll have about 20 seconds to answer these questions. And I'll be closing the poll here shortly. And as you can see, we have a fair few people with us today that don't work with a school feeding program, which is fine. We will talk about that. And now I'd like to introduce Dr. Peter Goldsmith, the director of USAID's Feed the Future Lab for Soybean Value Chain Research. Pete?
Yeah, thank you, Rose. Thank you, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. I wanted to give a little bit of background of what, why the Innovation Lab is undertaking this and kind of the strategic intent of this research for development activity. So we have this work is that we're going to talk about is also part of a manuscript, a report we're going to issue called National School Lunch Nutrition and Cost Profile, a case study of the Ghana school feeding program. And just as a teaser, where the paper has been completed, we're now sending it around for edits, and we'll provide all the attendees with a draft in the next week when we have the paper clean. So look for this report. And I'm going to talk a little bit about it now and then a little bit about it later. Next slide, Rose. Yeah, so the Soybean Innovation Lab's mission is to provide evidence for development practitioners. So development practitioners in this case would be those people running school feeding programs, caterers, policymakers, national legislators, private sector, and so forth involved in school lunch feeding. SIL, the Soybean Innovation Lab, is a multi-year research program, and we look at a lot of aspects of soybean, all the way from inputs all the way to utilization, the subject of this webinar. We operate in 14 countries. And the mission of the lab is to provide researchers, extensionists, the private sector, these practitioners that operate across the entire value chain, the critical information and technology needed for successful soybean development. So SIL sits in the background and supports the practitioners. And this is a very good example of providing research information for the development practitioners to use. So we focus on producing evidence-based guidance. Next slide, Rose. In this particular case, we had a fundamental question that a lot of practitioners were asking was, is fortifying a school lunch with soy cost effective? And that's what we address in the paper that we will issue here in the next week. No research to date answers this question. Okay, so practitioners are asking, and SIL is there to provide the answers. So how do governments, donors, contractors, the private sector, these practitioners fortify their school feeding programs? So there are a number of organizations involved in school feeding, and fortification is a very, very relevant question. To answer the overarching question about the cost effectiveness of soy, we had to answer the research. We had to know the baseline. We had to know what is in a school lunch, what's actually going into a student's mouth from a nutritional and cost basis. So we had to measure the actual ingredients and costs. And this is, Mally will talk about this later, but this is the most critical step that we undertook, and it was done really, really well by Mally and his team. Then we can look, once we know the baseline, we add in soy, and we can look at the trade-offs in terms of the protein quality, the protein quantity, and the cost per serving, which we analyze. And I'll touch on those in the findings section. Next slide. So specifically, we address, and you'll find in the report, answers to the following 7 questions. We won't answer those all today. This is quite a bit, but it's in the paper that we produce. So we answer, what is the level of school lunch nutrition that actually goes into a student's mouth? What is the ingredient cost to the caterer? Are caterer serving sizes the same for the same recipe? And we'll be looking at tomato stew. Do they all prepare it the same way? Are caterers sufficiently compensated? What are their costs of ingredients? And then, can soy have a role to play? How should caterers employ soy when they fortify with protein, when they're looking to elevate the protein level? And is soy cheaper or more expensive than most common forms of school lunch proteins? So those are the questions that we answer in the report that we will publish here shortly. So I'll throw it back to you, Rose.
Great, thank you, Pete. And at this point, I'd like to launch our next poll. For those of you who do work with school meals or school feeding programs, or for those of you who have collaborators or partners who do have experience in the school feeding programs, what protein sources are used in the school meals that you work with? And you'll have about 20 seconds to answer this question: either fish or poultry, beef or pork, dairy or eggs, soy, or other. And wrapping up the poll here shortly. And that's great. A fair few number of you actually do use soy, so that's wonderful. I'd like to turn the presentation over to Dr. Juan Andrade at this point, and he can go over more details into the nutritional value of soy in school lunches.
Hi, well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody. So I'm going to talk about what is the potential role from the nutrition point of view of bringing soy into a school lunch program. Rose, next slide. So just to remind you, soybeans are incredibly nutritious in terms of nutrient density and calorie density. They pack about 440 calories per 100 grams. They bring a significant proportion of protein, about 38%, oil, about 18%, and vitamins and minerals, including potassium, calcium, magnesium, as well as vitamin K, folic acid, and vitamin E, and especially choline, which is one important phospholipid for brain development. Next slide, Rose. So I just want to give a context of school lunch programs, and this was put together by the World Bank and was published in 2016 about a few case studies in different parts of the world, including Ghana. So here I just wanted to put some information to give a dimension of what is provided in school lunch programs in different countries. On the top left, we'll start with the what is given. The meal weight is about 230 to 125 grams, and this is about 500 and something calories, and the energy density for 100 grams is about 200 between 200 and 300 calories per 100 grams. And there's significant variability if you can see the standard deviations from program to program. When you look at what those meals are bringing in terms of carbohydrate, proteins, and fats, the meals are mostly carbohydrates, so there's significant variability. About 90 grams of carbs, and protein is given between 10 to 15% of protein, and fat between 10 as well, about 10 and 20% of fat, also significant variability. On the top, on the bottom left, you see the two bars, the requirement, the RDA, US RDA requirement of protein, 100% for children, is about 19 grams of protein for young children. For a little bit older children, you have about 30 34, 35 grams of protein. So school lunch programs are not providing 100% of the RDA. Of course, they provide a quota of the RDA. When you look on the right and the contributions of those nutrients to the calorie density of the meal, it's about 60% of those calories come from carbohydrates, 13% from protein, and about 24% from fats. And that makes them a very balanced meal. We argue that carbohydrates should be given between 50 to 65% of the calories, protein 10 to 20% of the calories, and fats between 20 to 35% of the calories. Next slide, Rose. So, and why it's important to give you that dimension is because when we think about providing those 20 grams or 34 grams of protein to satisfy the needs of this population, growing population, there's very few sources that can provide or pack that amount of protein in the pulses or legume group of plants. So here in this graph, you see soy, peanuts, lentils, chickpeas, lupin, and black beans. And by far, soy provides a significant amount of protein beyond the 20 grams that we argue as 100% of the RDA for children, for young children. Next slide, Rose. And this protein is of good quality compared to other pulses. Soybeans and soy protein extracts or protein isolates or concentrates have a high PDCAS, which stands for protein digestibility corrected amino acid score, which is a measurement of quality of the protein, and that makes soy a very qualified protein to provide to children, to growing children in schools. Next slide, Rose. And here I just want to finish with this slide in which I'll show you on the left that these were calculated with, these numbers are calculated with values from or prices from Ghana. And you can see that if you want to provide 100% of the US RDA of protein, which is about 20 grams for children 4 to 9, and about 34 grams for children 9 to 13 years of age, by far you need very small amounts of soy to provide these, and you still have enough funds to cover many children through these. If you see on the right on the graph, if you take $1 to cover the 20% protein which most programs are providing based on those case studies, you can feed with soybeans about 220 children with $1, or about 120 children 9 to 13 years of age. And it's very hard to do that with other animal source proteins such as milk, eggs, and ground beef, and why not, and also with cowpeas and groundnuts. And it is what makes our interest on bringing soy to fortify these lunches at a very affordable price, so the caterers they can enhance nutrition at a lower price. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Juan. And at this point, I'd like to launch our third and final poll of the webinar. For those of you who answered soy with the previous question, if you use soy in the school meals that you work with, what type of soy protein do you use? And you can select any of the following from a corn-soy blend, texturized soy protein, soy milk, soy flour, or some other source. And I'll be closing up the poll here shortly. Great. And before we head over to Moli's presentation, I would just like to remind everyone about the chat panel in your GoToWebinar control panel. It's on the very bottom. There's the chat function, the handouts function directly on top of that, where you can find the agenda, and then questions as well, where you can also fill in questions for our team to take to our presenters and our participants. In addition to everybody we have on the webinar participating virtually, we also have a number of participants attending from Ghana and the Tamale and Accra offices, including representatives from the Ghanaian National School Feeding Program, from the Food Research Institute and from our partners at Catholic Services. So we're very thrilled that you're here to join us. And Willie?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Rosemary. And welcome to Tamale, where I'm seated with a couple of people, including Mr. Samuelentin from Yedent. And welcome to all our participants. I'm going to spend a few minutes to describe how we went about this survey and describe the physical results. I call them physical because those are the things you can see in the course of preparing or serving a meal. So for this, we went in.
Willie, just a reminder, please
Hello?
stay as close to your microphone as possible. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Is it okay?
Perfect, thank you.
Sure. So for this survey, we worked in the northern region in 2 districts, specifically the Sagnarigu and the Tamale Metro. We selected caterers from a previous cohort of caterers that we had engaged in a training. We had initially had a conversation about 12 of these caterers, out of which we selected 7 to do some in-depth discussion with.
Hey, Mally, this is Pete Goldsmith.
Hello.
Hey, Pete Goldsmith. It's really important to not move around and stay very close to your microphone because you're going way out and way in and way out. Okay, so everyone can hear because this is important stuff.
Good to know. So just to be sure, can you hear me clearly now?
Yes, we hear you very clearly. Just try to stay in that same spot.
I hear. I'll try my best. Yeah, so we engage the caterers to understand what the common recipes they work with is. And so out of several recipes, we realized that tomato sauce with plain rice was a common one that ran across all the 7 caterers. And out of that, we chose 4 that we decided to have the in-depth survey with. And for this, we time to understand all the ingredients that go into the preparation of the tomato sauce with plain rice. Can we go on to the next slide, please? Hello, Rose. Yeah.
Hi, Willie. Did you get to the next slide?
Okay. So as you see, I don't think many of you. Hello. Did you want to say something?
No, I apologize. Please continue.
Thank you. So as you see, there are several ingredients, but we had to identify each of them, obtain the cost for each ingredient and the quantities that they actually use in the recipe. And we actually also purchased some in the market to make sure that we're talking about the same quality and the same kind of ingredients, mostly from the to validate this. We then use a questionnaire to visit the caterers in their kitchens. Can you go to the next slide, please? Yes, so we took time, we agreed with each caterer and agreed on the times that they prepare this particular meal in the course of the week, and went over mostly from around very early in the morning, about 5:30, to observe the preparation of this meal. We time to measure the weight and amount of each ingredient that they used, and to also identify or note the method for the preparation of the meal, and also measure how much of each the meal that each student was receiving at the end of the day when they were being served. We took note of the cooking time and the amount served per child, and this forms the basis of the analysis that is being presented in this report today. Next slide. So I'll take time just to describe some of the physical results as I mentioned earlier on. In terms of, since the nutritional analysis will be presented later by Dr. Goldsmith. On the average, we find that, and in this case, I'm talking about all ingredients, including some other elements such as the cost of fuel wood that is used in preparing the food, the cost of water that is used in, not what is added, but water that is used in cleaning, in all the activities that go into preparation of the meals. We did not include the cost of labor in terms of the cook that help the caterers in the preparation of this meal. Out of the 100 cedis that the caterers receive for a child for serving this food, we found that on the average for all these costs, they spend on the average 67.18 pesos, which means that they earn a gross margin of about 32. That is considering all these ingredients and fuel costs. Dr. Goldsmith will be presenting details that specify only the major ingredients without the cost of water and without the cost of fuel wood. So please take note when he presents that data later on today. And based on this, we are able to identify that carbohydrates form on the average about 72% of the cost of the meals, whereas proteins form just about 4% based on this overall costing. As I mentioned earlier, we found that caterers did not have specific menu guide or specific standards in most cases that they use in the work they do. And we found that a few of them did have some initial guidance. So, as I mentioned also, we can to note the list of the ingredients that.
Hey, Mally, you're fading out again. If you can move close to the mic, that would help. We don't want to miss anything.
Sure. My head is actually buried in my computer as I speak. I don't know if the internet reception has anything to do with my voice, but
yeah, when you do that, it's much better. It's great. It's great.
Okay, thank you. So can we move to the next slide, please? Actually, the next, the last slide. Yeah. Sure. So I'll just take a few moments to describe some of the challenges we noticed. We found that many of the caterers, in fact, as at the time we were speaking with the caterers, none of them had received payments for the previous term and the current term since they started participating in the program, and this seemed to be demotivating them and also affecting the quantity, the level of the, in fact, their purchasing of ingredients and how they manage their suppliers, and therefore we think that that impinges on the level of quality of meal they serve. Most of the caterers have difficulty documenting what they do, and so it might be important to find a way to help them with documentation or record keeping in the future. Another important aspect, and in fact, we are careful not to be very emotional about this during this presentation. We found the environment within which the caterers operate to be very challenging. And at the time, it was the dry season, and we think that it might even be worse when the rainy season comes. And so this is an important aspect that needs to be addressed uh, quite urgently. Uh, we also think that another issue is the issue of hygiene, hand washing. A couple of the children ate without washing their hands because they didn't have any system for doing so. A few caterers tried to provide that, probably not the best way, but then there was some system attempting to provide that, but generally that needs to be addressed. In almost all the schools also, we found a situation where some teachers or several teachers make demands of the caterers that is quite challenging for them to meet, in terms of the teachers demanding to be provided meals, sometimes even specifying the quality and the quantities, and that becomes a bigger challenge for the caterers to meet on a daily basis. Generally, and that is the purpose of this webinar, is to see how soy can be integrated into the meals to help ramp up the level of protein. Because to just paint a picture, if you consider the fact that it was possible for about 200 children to be sharing 2 or 3 cans of 400-gram mackerel among themselves as the only source of protein, then I'm sure you can imagine the level that is being actually provided to them. And on that note, I want to pause here and look forward to address any questions that may have come up. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. And at this moment, I'd like to turn it back over to Pete to talk a little bit more about some example findings from the case study with the Ghana School Feeding Program.
Yeah, thank you, Rose. Yeah, as you can see, that the study was fairly comprehensive. Oh yeah, you got the slide up, great. And I just wanted, we don't have a lot of time because we want to get to our panel, but we thought it'd be interesting to share just 3 findings, and there are many others, and will lead to a very good discussion once the report is issued. One of the first findings, and this was something Mali really captured very, very well, and it's very important for those of us who understand, and those of you who understand the literature on school lunch nutrition. This is really relevant. A lot of work has been done analyzing school lunches for children. There's a very, very deep literature, but very few, we found only one actually, to our knowledge, actually measures the food going into the student's mouth, weighs it, knows the ingredients, costs, etc., like our team was able to put together. And the reason that's important, and we'd urge people not to go off of just a published recipe or even a 24-hour recall. Those are much less expensive. I understand that. But that what a caterer provides a student, even though they're producing the same tomato stew recipe, is going to differ significantly. And so there were great differences in the ingredients. There were 17 different ingredients used across the 4 caterers. Only 7 were common. And so their cost, the availability, the amount they use is going to differ. So it's very important to verify what is the nutrition and what is the cost actually going into the student's mouth. Because certainly caterers are not paid by nutritional outcomes, they're paid by a fixed cost depending on what the program allocates. Next slide. A second finding was looked at three types of soy fortification approaches. One was texturized soy protein, which costs, thanks to our partner at Eden Samuel, he's estimating that's about 17.5 cedis per kilo. So it's an expensive product, but a very, very functional product. It really absorbs the flavor and has very good performance within a recipe. Soy flour is much cheaper. And I forgot to mention texturized soy protein that we used in the study is at a 50% protein level. So it's very high in protein. Texturized soy flour that we used is the one we used was a moderate protein level at 38%, but it only costs 5 cedi per kilo. So as Juan was pointing out, it's very cost effective, but it does have limits because it's soy flour. It can't be used really in excess of 10 grams per serving, but it is very, very efficient and low cost. And then tofu is a fine ingredient. It is about 14 cedis per kilo, but the protein level is quite low because it's cultured milk, and so it's protein at 8%. And you can see from the table that the three soy ingredients vary significantly in how they affect both the protein levels, but also other nutrients as well. So it really depends on what the objectives and the cost, what the cost that the students in the program are able to bear. So we replace 10 grams of rice with 10 grams of soy, but either texturized soy protein, soy flour, or tofu, and they vary significantly in their effects on the nutrient levels of the tomato stew. And the third finding we're going to share with you, and again, there are a number of findings, was the point that Juan made about the efficiency. And the way we measured efficiency is the cost per point elevation in the percent RDA for protein for children 4 to 8 years old. And that's the y-axis of this figure. So a smaller bar is a good thing, meaning it costs little to increase the percentage of the RDA for protein in the meal. And you'll see I'll start with just soy flour as the most cost effective, costing very little to move a point of RDA compliance. And then TSP, it's about 3 times better than TSP. TSP is very functional, does a lot of other good things, and can be included at very high levels, but it is more expensive than soy flour when trying to improve the protein level. Ground beef is 4 times as expensive. And mackerel, the reason I use mackerel here is because that is the protein source, the most common protein source among the caterers. So that's used, it's a dried mackerel that's used as the protein source for the tomato stew in northern Ghana. And tofu is not such a great ingredient from a cost perspective because it's relatively expensive and its protein level at 14 cedi a kilo and relatively low in protein at 8%. It has a lot of water. It does a lot of good things for the meal in terms of what consumers like and so forth. But in terms of cost effectiveness, if you simply want to raise the protein level, then alternatives like soy flour or even what's currently being used, mackerel, would be superior to tofu. So those are just 3 findings. that we share. And then I think there'll be other questions and comments. And as you see, read the full report and see all of the outcomes in their entirety. So I'll throw it back to you, Rose, so we can go to our panel.
Great, thank you very much, Pete, and thank you to all our presenters this morning. At this point, I'd like to segue over into our panel. And I believe joining us today is Chris with Catholic Relief Services, who will be introducing our panel and speaking with them about different things involved with soy and school lunch. Chris, are you there?
Yeah, don't forget to unmute. I don't know if, Chris, you're with Philip.
Hey, Pete, this is Chris. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you sound great. You sound great.
All right. So good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for the introduction, Rose. As introduced, my name is Chris Azhar. I am the country representative for Catholic Relief Services, calling in from Ghana, along with the other meeting participants. Many of you might know that CRS globally and here in Ghana has a proud history of food assistance and supplementary feeding programs. Our food assistance to the poor and needy in Ghana has resulted in CRS being recognized in the National School Feeding Program policy. This is a history, accomplishment, and acknowledgement for which we at CRS are very proud. Though CRS Ghana is no longer operational with food distribution interventions, we remain committed to build the capacity of households and communities to understand how we can produce, process, prepare, and consume nutritious meals. This sustained commitment has resulted in our input to utilization programming here in Ghana. The collaboration with the USAID Feed the Future Soybean Innovation Lab represents a strategic partnership where we are working to address food insecurity and improve nutrition through the soybean value chain, and particularly the Research for Development Initiative of the Soybean Innovation Lab. The conversation today is an exciting one, as it is an important step to improve nutritional status of Ghanaian students with healthy school lunches through the Ghana School Feeding Program. While acknowledging the good work of the Ghana School Feeding Program, we realize that improved nutritional status cannot be achieved by the government alone. Success will require commitment and intentional partnerships between the public sector, NGOs, the private sector, while actively engaging with market forces to ensure market-based solutions are integrated into our efforts, and the research for development findings coming out of the Soybean Innovation Lab can be taken at scale. It is with great pleasure that I have the privilege of introducing the panel today. We'll be speaking on the theme, Public-Private Partnerships to Scale Findings. Here in Accra with me today, we have the distinguished pleasure of welcoming the Deputy National Coordinator of the Ghana School Feeding Program, Ms. Gertrude Kweshinga. Madam Gertrude, you're welcome.
Yeah, hello.
Also on the line and part of our panel is a representative from the World Food Program, Naga Kaye. Hello, Naga. We're going to hope that Naga is simply on mute, and I will try to. Hello, Naga. We're getting some feedback. We're hoping that's you, Naga, calling in from the World Food Program. And then also on the call, calling in with my colleagues in the CRS Tamale office, we have the CEO and MD for Yedent Agro Processing, a company that is based in Sunyani, Mr. Samuel Unton. Mr. Samuel, you are welcome.
Thank you.
So I would like to start out, thank you, Samuel. So I'd like to start off by with Mrs. Gertrude Kweshinga, the Deputy National Coordinator. Ms. Gertrude, you are most welcome.
Thank you.
Here in Ghana, when we say school feeding programs, we automatically think of the Ghana school feeding program. We all know the depth, breadth, and scale of your work. And we also know the real life challenges which you face. So we understand that you have a national scope and scale. How many, on average, how many lunches do you serve per day throughout the country?
Okay, we are serving about 2.107 pupils across the whole country of 216 districts in the 10 regions of our country.
So throughout all 10 regions,
Yes.
and 2.1 million.
Yes.
Million.
Yes.
And that is within 216 districts.
Yes.
That is quite an operation that you that you run throughout the country. And what a touch point.
That is covering about 49.5% of our population in Ghana.
49, so every day you have the task of cooking 49.5% of the meals for children in Ghana, or of all population in Ghana.
Yes.
And then through all these 2.1 million meals that you serve a day, what are the most commonly served dishes in your program?
Actually, they serve some soya. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, in the tomato gravy. Some women also know how to serve soya. It's on the market. They buy and use. They also do a lot of green leaves as well. Our green leafy vegetables, they use it across the whole country. Yes. And also fish as well as poultry. Those are the protein aspects of the food that the children eat.
Okay.
Yes.
And then so today's theme is public-private partnerships to scale the findings as researchers like the Soybean Innovation Lab bring these types of findings to the table. You know, from your very unique national perspective, what do you think is needed to improve the school programs that provide nutritious lunch? Like specifically, what do we need to be doing better?
I think we have to intensify the use of protein products in our country or in the eating habits of children. We have to intensify it. We have to train our women how to use more of that in the respect of the fish and the chicken, because you can see that protein-wise, soya contains a lot of protein, in the food intake, as well as also enriching the children's brain capacity in the classrooms. So that will help them to learn better in school. So we think that that is the option. So we're looking at that. So actually go into partnership with you. Wouldn't mind at all.
Excellent.
That will help us a lot. That will help us a lot. And then we also noticed that that is also cheaper, when it comes to actually spending on protein for the children's feeding. Soya is virtually cheaper. It's worse up. It's even more digestible, So it serves a lot of purpose.
Excellent.
In the feeding aspect of our children.
Excellent. Madam Gertrude, you mentioned you mentioned partnerships. In the minute that we have left with you, could you say what guidance you have for groups who are on this call who are looking to partner with your organization to improve lunches? What guidance would you have for us? You have a captive audience of many stakeholders here.
Actually, the guidance is all about you coming with a plan of action. That will help us with the procurement law to also go and see how best that can be captured in our budget. So I think that it's all about you. Your proposals must be very, very good for us to take, to work with as well. So I think that should be the way forward. Yes.
Gertrude Questionga, thank you very much. I appreciate your insight.
Thank you.
Moving on with the panel, I'd like to invite the World Food Program representative, Naga, if you are on the line. Hello, Naga. Or Nanga, I'm sorry. Nanga, unfortunately.
Yeah, we're gonna have to. Their mic just doesn't seem to be working well, Chris.
Okay. So what we're gonna do is thanks Pete and Nanga. Sorry that we're missing you on this panel. We're gonna move up north to Tamale, where we have Samuel Inton of Yedin Agro Processing. Samuel, are you on the line?
Yes, I am.
Samuel, thanks for joining us on this conversation about public-private partnerships to scale findings to improve the nutritious school feeding programs in this country. Samuel, could you tell us, I think you bring a unique perspective, could you tell us a little bit about your business, where it's located, and what you actually produce?
Okay. My business is Yedent Agro. We are primarily a cereal and legume processing company based in Sunyani. We process, we fortify cereals with soybean and micronutrients for the market. We do soy flour, and we are about to start doing TSP. We are also the supply chain partner in Ghana for the WISH program, the USD WISH program, and have some exposure to the usage of TSP across West and East Africa. We have some collaboration with them, and they give us some QSP quantity, some quality sample program for TSP, which we are currently trying to see how it can be incorporated into some of the school feeding lunches on an experimental basis with the help of Mrs. Koshigan of the school feeding program.
Excellent. And then you talked about a number of your products. Could you talk specifically how you feel the products that you developed are rightfully aligned for the Ghana school feeding program to improve nutritious content of school lunches? Could you talk briefly about how you see those rightfully aligned?
Yes. For us, we think the main malnutrition problem confronting Ghana is protein deficiency and micronutrient deficiency. So our product development has always revolved around how can we enhance protein, and how can we enhance micronutrients, and how can we also bring this type of foods to the market in a safe, convenient manner. For instance, when Dr. Peter was talking about the benefits of soy flour over the other protein issues, the other protein variables, you realize it was better, soy flour was better in terms of cost, maybe 3 times better than TSP, this than that, this than that, this than that. When it also comes to convenience, you realize that, for instance, why do we want to get TSP into the school feeding lunch? Once you are able to take the soy oil out, and you also texturize the soy into texturized meat, it fits into the psychic of the Ghanaian trying to eat and get something chewed up. And these are some of the socio-cultural elements that we, in addition to convenience, as well as cost, that want to bring on board and see how we can bring those offerings to the school feeding program and other institutional programs in other senior high schools, in prisons, in hospitals, all over. So that's what we're trying to do and assess the technology for it.
Excellent. Well, thank you. It sounds like your products are certainly rightfully aligned. Briefly, I was wondering if you could share your business plans. You talked about costs, you talked about knowledge, your business plan to make sure your foods are introduced to the Ghana market and specifically to the Ghana school feeding program? Are you looking at cost? Are you looking at convenience? You made a good case on quality and the right fit for improved nutrition. But what is your business plans to make sure your good products are being taken up?
One of the pillars of our business is affordability. How do we bring the products affordable to the end user? And as it has clearly been shown by this case study, soy is one surest source of affordable protein. Currently, there is not available technology for TSP production in the country, but we're trying to put together a processing plant that will be certified by the Food and Drugs Board, as well as the Ghana Standards Authority, and also have some technical assistance from the USDA WISH to come and help us start that plant running by this year. In terms of cost, when TSP is imported from mainly the US in Ghana, the cost element and everything works out to something around, including taxes, around 30 something Ghana cedis per kilo, which is something around $7. Once that product is produced in country, I think it could be sold around 50 to 55% of that cost, something around 16 to 20 Ghana cedis. Again, proven research has shown that because of the high quality protein of TSP, the protein levels are around 50%. A child needs something around 8 grams to give him close to around 40 to 50% of his daily protein requirement. That then works out that a kilo of the product can feed 120 children and deliver those protein quality to them. It works out to something around between 45 Ghana cedis to 60 something Ghana pesos. 40 something pesos to the so comparatively, it's far cheaper than egg. It's about 50% lower than egg. And again, because one portion of TSP can absorb 3 portions of water, it will go to increase the sauce size and make a fantastic meal. And TSP is also amenable to whatever spices that you infuse in. So those are the dynamics we are looking at, and how can we bring this skill, train caterers across the length and breadth of the country, and also make this in the public space, which I think partnerships and with all of you becomes very critical to position this product as a very good product for the future.
Samuel, your passion and your commitment is coming out clear, and it's great to have the private sector coming on with innovations to boost the efforts of other stakeholders in the government. Thank you very much, and best of luck with your endeavors. Before we wrap up, we're going to go back to see if our representative Nanga Kai from the World Food Program is on the line. Nanga?
Yes, hello everyone. Nanga speaking from Accra.
Hello, Nanga. Greetings. Great to hear your voice. We just have a little bit. We just have a little bit of time, but it's important that we get the World Food Program's perspective on this. Globally, the World Food Program is known as a major player in working to address issues of food insecurity and feeding programs. But maybe your work in the Ghana school feeding program is not as known. Can you tell us a little bit about your operations here in Ghana?
Yes, hello. Thank you everybody for being and inviting us to join this panel. I'm I'm speaking on behalf of Vera Quara, which is who's our nutritionist, who have done a lot of work in the past with the school feeding program. As you know, WFP in Ghana has handled the school feeding up until a few years ago when we turned it over to the government. It's now homegrown school feeding. I'm afraid I'm not in a better position to give you much detail on that, but suffice to say, WFP continues to support the Ghana school program in areas of, or thinking at least toward some standardized menu planners, meal compositions, and so forth, and continue to support on the policy issues. We have another segment of population that we're helping. We're really trying to support the Ghana Health Services to address the issues of stunting and then the micronutrient deficiencies. We're doing this through a public-private partnership. One of the panelists is one of our beneficiaries, so to speak, or our partner rather, that is very key in this work. We try to link smallholder farmers to these industrial food processors that we have audited, and our food technologists have helped to figure out how to set up state-of-the-art new lines that would be able to produce these specialized nutritious food to address the needs of these two vulnerable population categories. So in general, that's really our main focus is to go through the value chain approach. We use soybean quite a bit and maize as well. So corn soy blend is really some of the basis for the food that we distribute across the world. And now we're very fortunate that we're able to actually manufacture or produce this food at a local level, which has been very, very helpful for us.
Nanga, thank you. Exciting to hear about your continued investments and efforts in supporting here in Ghana. The conversation today is really on public-private partnerships to scale research findings. And throughout your previous submission, you shared about working at all aspects of the value chain. Specifically around boosting nutritious value of school lunches, what do you think needs to be improved, particularly with the engagement of the private partnerships to address some of these bottlenecks? Any insights from the World Food Program?
The World Food Program's been working with a few agencies, namely the Food and Drugs Authority. As you know, they are the regulatory body charged with the responsibility of ensuring food safety and quality. We're developing a relationship with them to ensure we have a good system of monitoring market and being able to survey what's happening, the kinds of food to detect issues and problems. We're also working closely with the Food Research Institute to guide some of our food processors as we work with them. They are really the basis for the food technologists. So yeah, we're really trying to partner with the government agencies. We're contracting and working with private laboratories as well as be able to ensure that we actually know the composition, we know the nutrient contents of the things we're distributing, not only in terms of food quality, but safety as well.
Nanga, thank you very much. I appreciate you taking the time. And on behalf of all of us, I'd like to thank our entire panel, Gertrude Kwashinga, the Deputy National Coordinator for the Ghana School Feeding Program, Mr. Naga Kaye, representative of the World Food Program, and Mr. Samuel Ntum, the CEO and Managing Director from Yedin Agro Food Processing. Very exciting to see various stakeholders coming together as the Ghana School Feeding Program looks to be feeding 2.1 million children a day in 216 districts at the World Food Program. Private sector is there, and organizations and initiatives like the Soybean Innovation Lab are really applying research for development and working on evidence-based solutions to go to scale to improve school feeding in this country. Thank you very much, panel. I did a lot to stimulate that conversation. We went a little over time, Rosemary. Please pardon us on that, but I'll pass it over to you from Accra. Bye-bye.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris. We really appreciate you taking the time to run the panel, and we really appreciate everyone participating and just your energy and just the types of information and experiences that you were able to share with us about the partnerships and collaborations that you all are a part of. And now I'd like to turn it over to our Q&A panel. Just as a reminder, you can either use the chat feature in your GoToWebinar control panel there on the left. It's the last option, the last drop-down menu, or just a few above that, questions. So either way, you can ask our team questions, and we'll be collecting those questions and then having them answered for you. So at the moment, I'd like to turn it over to Pete Goldsmith, who has been collecting some of the questions and would like to give those to our presenters and potentially some of our panelists. Pete?
Yeah, thanks, Rose. What a wonderful panel. We have, it's great to see people online attending the webinar. And then also people in Accra and in Tamale, and everyone is sending in questions. So we only have 9 minutes, so we'll ask as many questions as we can. And panelists, please be as brief as you can in answering them. And the questions we don't get to, we will definitely follow up and provide you with an answer. But I'd like to start, and maybe Juan, this would be directed at you, but others, Samuel as well. This is from a Al Hassan Sadiq up in the Sagnarugu district in Ghana, asked about, can you define TSP and compare it to a definition of tofu?
Okay, certainly. So TSP stands for texturized soy protein, also called texturized vegetable protein. And this is soy flour that is being defatted, either pressing mechanically or removed through solvent extraction. And this soy that has some moisture in the process is being placed into an extruder at high temperature. And this high temperature extrusion will lead into a product that is very light and has a protein content of about 50%. Tofu is a product of a curdling soy milk, and you can use acids and salts to create this this product, and then you can either have a soft texture or consistency, or you can have press it and then you have a harder consistency, and depending on the use, you can have soft or hard tofus. The protein content depends on the pressing that you do on the curds. You might have anything between 6 to 8% protein.
Thanks, Juan. We had a quick comment from a question from Dick Tinsley, which he asked about where tofu was on our choices. Go to meeting only gives us 5, Dick. So we were constrained in that. So good catch on that. And we assumed in other, that's where tofu would fall. We have a great question from Valentine Echaribasam. And Valentine is with Premium Foods Limited in Ghana. And Valentine asks, concerning the digestibility of soya, does the processing method used to get the soya into a finished product affect the digestibility levels? So maybe Juan, that might be something you'd want to tackle.
Yes, certainly. You are exactly right, Valentine. Processing does affect digestibility. For the most part, soybeans are a very processed type crops, require either what you mentioned, soaking, roasting, sprouting, or cooking, boiling, steaming. All of these help enhance the digestibility, but the digestibility doesn't just apply to protein. Digestibility applies to every single nutrient that the food is bringing. So you can talk about digestibility of proteins, carbohydrates, digestibility of micronutrients, iron, zinc, and why not. But when we talk about protein digestibility, roasting helps remove some of the anti-nutrients that most legumes or pulses bring, such as trypsin inhibitors, such as tannins and why not. Roasting helps with that as much as soaking. Soaking also removes some of these soluble carbohydrates that sometimes are associated with digestibility issues in people. So for the most part, soaking also helps with the preparation of the protein for cooking, so that the protein can be broken apart into single amino acids for absorption. But you're completely right, digestibility is modified by the processing. Thank you.
Thanks, Juan. Next question comes from a participant in Accra, in the group there. In the absence of donor support, so this is a question for Ghana School Feeding, what is the Ghana School Feeding Program doing to introduce soy into school lunch? There seems to be some level of awareness of the importance of soy in school lunch. Are there any approaches, strategies underway for soy inclusion in the Ghana School Feeding Program? I don't know if that's answerable, but I throw that out there to the panel.
For now, to introduce soya into the school feeding program, we're trying to come up with a training which I call the innovative and nutritional training, which we're going to use more of this soya to prepare food. Actually going to teach our women on hands-on training to actually give them the knowledge as to how soya can be used to prepare food for the children. So that is on the way. We actually gotten to the end of the program, which we are going to roll up by the end of this month. Hello.
Super. Thank you very much.
Yes.
So, was there another response?
That's that for now, because we realize that in preparing food with soya, it actually gives every child the benefit to eat well, and then it's not a matter of just giving some children some protein and some will not have at all. But this is actually coming in the source, like minced soya, for example. You can mix it with vegetables, and every child will have access to eat that with anything like rice or any tubers or anything that would give them the benefit. We also are appealing to you if you can come on board to assist us with some fundings or some brandings like aprons, capes, and some other things to help us to achieve this aim, because the first of its kind in the country. And then as far as school feeding is concerned, it's the first of its kind that we're trying to roll out. It's a very important, program that we actually, bringing on board Ghana School Feeding.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was really good. We have probably time for 2 more questions. We got a very good question from Inger Millard, and Inger is, I think, calling in from Denmark, and she's with Ghana Friends, an organization, Ghana Friends. And Inger asked, are school caterers in Ghana trained on child nutrition? And what monitoring is being done at the schools? I don't know if any of the panelists can handle that question for Inger. Do you know, Don?
Yes.
Say it again.
Yeah.
Yeah, the question from Inger was about school caterers in Ghana being trained on child nutrition and what monitoring is being done at the schools.
Which manner?
Monitoring.
Yeah. Oh, but our monitoring department, the MAE, our monitoring evaluation department, we do a lot of that. We're around the schools to actually monitor the quality of food that the children are eating. So it is based upon these monitoring reports that we have come out with this training that we think that is going to be a benefit to all the women, because they might have some lapses which we have to upgrade or update. So that's what we're doing for now.
Yeah, thank you very much. And our final question comes from Don Humpall. And before I ask it, do know that we will be answering all your questions directly after we close the webinar, and also a copy of the webinar will be made available to everyone. Don Humpall is from Development Alternatives Inc., DAI, in the US. And Don asked a question about, are the soy costs given based on soy products processed in Ghana, or are they imported from the US? And then how much of the school feeding market in Ghana can be supplied by the Ghana soy supply chain? And this is a great question, Don. So the short answer was that all of the soy products other than the TSP are available in Ghana, and those costs are Ghanaian costs. And so that supply chain exists. And then why Chris had as a panelist Eden, Samuel, and Tim, because they want to now move to that next step and produce TSP domestically. And that would, as Samuel said, drop the price essentially in half. So the whole strategy is for a local supply of soy. So I'll leave it at that. So I want to thank everyone for all their questions. There are just too many to answer in our time, and we'll follow up. I'll throw it back to you, Rose.
Hi, great. Thank you so much, Pete. And like Pete said, all of these materials will be made available after the webinar via a recording, and that link will also be sent out through our materials, our newsletters, our digests. It will also be available on our website, which you can see up there, soybeaninnovationlab.illinois.edu. We are also on Facebook and Twitter at Soybean Innovation Lab, if you search that on Facebook. And our handle on Twitter is Tropical Soy Lab. And again, thank you so much for everybody for joining us, and thank you so much to the panelists, the presenters, and all of the team members that made today possible. This was fantastic. And make sure, one last thing, we're trying to make sure that our webinars are to the point and relevant to our audiences. So after the webinar closes, there will be a very short survey, and we'd really appreciate it if you just take a few minutes and share your thoughts with us on how you believe that the survey, or the webinar went. And we're also just collecting some more information about your experiences with school feeding programs and soy. So we will also be addressing those questions that you submitted offline. And again, thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next time at our next webinar. Thank you again.